in testnet, or also is your plan
Yeah.
for mainnet?
Boone, I
Or
just
that-
pasted a picture, just FYI. But yeah, we'll try yours when it's done.
Interesting. So it's when you try to upload it, it just complains.
It actually, it's like not even, but it's like when I like attach it,
Wow.
it says that.
Interesting.
So, which makes me wonder if every single SR tool blob I've put on a release is actually just bogus, which would be really funny. Because I've been like putting all this effort into curating those, and it's just like nothing.
Doesn't actually work.
Yeah. But no, it's the same one the CI uses, so no, this is probably a deeper problem. Maybe the other one.
You guys. Let's do mainnet. Fuck all this testnet shit. Let's just go.
Let's just go straight mainnet. No, I don't.
Straight.
No.
Raw dog.
That's a great idea.
Oh, the other one like succeeded. I think it deployed. Hold on.
You think that's what I want for my mainnet deployment?
Yeah.
We think it deployed. We're not sure.
Let's see.
Sorry that we can't do it the way that you want.
It's on 221.
Oh wow. Okay.
So there you go. Very, very anticlimactic. Like I said, I figured the CI would be faster
Wait,
than me.
Wait, it upgraded?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
That was
The
super
alpha map
anticlimactic.
zoo.
Yeah, I just modified the workflow so it skips try runtime, and it still had to run try runtime and let it fail, and then it did the second.
Beautiful.
It's
Look
all
at all
there.
of the. Look at all those subnets on testnet. Look at them all floating around. We're here, guys. We made it. That was super anticlimactic. It was like, oh no, it's not happening, and then oh, it's happening.
I think it's been up for like 2 minutes.
It's been
At
up for
least.
2 minutes.
Like from the time I said it, it was like probably 2 minutes before that.
Okay, great. So it went through. So you can do BT CLE. Hell yeah. BT CLE, hell yeah. Can we get that please implemented? So we have all 255 basically unknown subnets out there on the chain right now, which is pretty cool.
What happens to, because I've got like a number after that. So have you reaped all of them, or are they just not showing up in the display?
Sorry, what was that again, Thorlins?
My testnet number is 268, or like what I use. So is
should we stake to it?
No, please. Let's use 1 or 2 or something.
Okay, well let's stake to what was it? 268? All right, so people who want to follow along, right? We did this so that people could play around with it and be helpful for people. So here, let me give you little commands to mess around with this. Really simple. So go get a 3.11 Python VM. And then what we want to do is pip install. Hey, Abe, can you post in the actual command to upgrade? What is that command? It's this one. I got it. Never mind. To make it, then you just run this source. So if y'all want to do that, you can just run this, and then you can run the CLI. It's just so much more work to say CLI than CLI. All right, so stop razzing at me. And then you can do BTCLI list like this, and that will show you all the subnets on testnet.
So as far as the branches go, I'm going to open up PRs to get. So right now, if anybody is expecting testnet to match what's in the testnet branch like it should, it does not right now. DevNet Ready has the current code that's on testnet, but I'm going to shortly fix that. Just FYI, everybody. Not matching because Const wants to. What? He's right here. You can speak to him.
Yeah, there's no camera.
No.
No camera.
Osprey.
What?
I just accidentally.
Okay. So if somebody wants to see, let me the screen. And Sam, can you mute your children? Just mute your children for us or wife. I'm not sure, whichever it is.
It's not me.
Oh, it's someone else. Moderators, you have full permission to mute people's wives. There you go. I found the person. Muted. Great. Why don't I share my screen? Questions in the chat. Why don't we go ahead and mess around with this? So why don't we stake to say, are you guys following? You guys looking at my screen here? All good people? You can see
Yep.
it? It's visible. So stake add. Why don't we actually look at the subnets first? So btcli subnets list. And actually we're going to make sure that it's on. I don't think the default is tests, right? So let's go look at this and we're going to see a absolute dump of the, I think 276 subnets, right? So each one, we just launched 276 cryptocurrencies, guys. Round of applause.
Beautiful.
276. Has anybody on this call ever launched 276 cryptocurrencies in one binary? I don't think so. So here they all are, randomly ordered because they're cap, and no one has staked anything into any of these subnets. So, by the way, please mute anybody that makes lots of noise, so I don't have to do it, guys. The slippage is going to be out of this world initially. Now, we decided to do that because we didn't want to do pre-mine on these tokens. And it just takes a little bit of time in terms of blocks before the liquidity in these pools piles up and becomes readily available for people. So let's take a look at that. So actually, really cool command is to run the the subnet list in live. So Abe did this nicely. It creates kind of like a Bloomberg terminal for you, where every block or two, we actually update all of the available tau in the pools, alpha in the pool, the stake, the supply outstanding. So I'll just give you one look at that. So this is what that looks like. Some might notice that there's 2 additional subnet tokens per block here. That's actually consistent. So in the current design for dynamic tau, the supply is actually capped at 21 million, although it reaches that point slightly faster than it would otherwise if we were just using 1 per block. So actually the supplies of the subnet tokens are actually twice as fast in accruement. And every block, some proportion of that 2 subnet token is being pushed into either the liquidity supply of the pool, or going to miners and validators. So if we zoom in a little bit here, I don't know if people can kind of see this, right? So there's 1.18 that's gone paid to miners and validators, and 0.82 that has gone into the liquidity pool. So this is going to take some time for there to be enough liquidity in these pools for people to really, let's say, ape into them. Someone just, yeah, for sure. Is that more helpful?
Also, people were requesting that you move over to the stage because the stream is limited to a certain amount of viewers.
Okay. Let's do that. It was fun while it lasted.
Yeah.
Let's try the stage. All right, No one can interrupt me anymore. We'll have a bunch of people on this call, and we'll do a bit of a demo on what we just launched. It was fun to do it all together in that chat. A successful launch. We did actually have some questions about whether or not it was going to work. Like, it's a massive upgrade to the chain. There's a lot of balances that need to be migrated. So anybody who wants to get on the stage to chat or ask questions, feel free. I kind of prefer the TJFT style where I can just hear people's family speaking in the background. But here we are. So if there are other people in the other channel, just go ahead and like nudge them back over. Yeah, let's go through a bit of a demo. So people can understand like the core of the dynamic tau upgrade that we just saw. Let's get Shib on the stage. Shib, get on the stage. Hell yeah. Yeah, all right. So let me show a bit of a tutorial or like on what we built. So we're about to like unleash something into the BitTensor ecosystem, which will have profound effects on the way in which we value tau, and also profound effects on the way in which the economies in the subnets work. We're effectively launching on mainnet 64 individual tokens across 64 teams. Many of you, I don't think, knew that you were going to create a cryptocurrency when you signed up for this rodeo, but you're now effectively going to be cryptocurrency owners when this all goes through, which is really crazy, guys. It's a lot of work, and it's a very exciting thing as well. The whole goal for us with Dynamic Tau is figuring out a way that we can use the crowd to organize the emission of BitTensor rather than the root network. And it was about a year ago that it actually was exactly 1 year ago that we did the first presentation on Dynamic Tau. I don't know, maybe some of you were here. I'm not sure if everyone was here for that, but it was a really exciting call. I think that it was a bit premature. There was still a lot left to do in regards to designing Dynamic Tau. We have a pretty heavy lift with this design, specifically because we have 8 million tau outstanding, and we need to figure out a way that we could allocate that 8 million tau in a safe way without destroying the underlying economics. As soon as we told people about the Dynamic Tau upgrade, the first thing people said was, hey, there needs to be a risk-free staking method. I simply don't want to have to evaluate subnets, so we had to build that in. That was one of the core things that we focused on with this design, was making it so that people could still make dividends and still stake to validators. On top of that, we had a very hard problem of smoothing over the markets. How do we go from their current state with the set of validators being as they are today to a completely new set of individuals that hold the specific token associated with the network that are doing consensus? Not an easy task, and something that we really wanted to make sure went smoothly during the transition, so that nothing fell apart. Like we have some very performant systems right now, and we don't want to destroy them on this launch. So that was another thing that we had to pay close attention to. Now, over the year as well, we worked with a large number of people to design a mechanism that could not be gamed. Early versions of Dynamic Tau potentially suffered from ways for whales to manipulate the emission flow of tau, to pump their own bags. And we had to work for a very long time with many experts in the field, as well as working with some of the best hackers in this ecosystem to tell us about all the ways that they would break the system when it was launched. And we went through many iterations of that. Then we needed to figure out a way of making it so that the subnets that were launched initially didn't have a massive advantage over the ones that got launched later in the ecosystem. We wanted to build it so that the ecosystem subnet tokens could have a life of their own and weren't reliant upon the network at large necessarily, and that it could eventually become fully fledged economies like BitTensor is today. We even had to build a design into which currently exists, which would allow us to actually fork the mechanism of dynamic tau and change it after the fact without costing people cash. So we actually built a way for us to modify dynamic tau if we need to. I don't think that we will need to, but we wanted to have that second stepping stone if we needed to get somewhere else. What were other considerations? Pigeon, you're up on the stage. You've been working on this for months. Like, what are some other things that we had to think about in this design?
Yeah, like another thing that we want to do is try to stick to the pure market design. We don't want to like interfere with the way that people are trading. And for example, for a while, we want to cap how much the token can grow. But at the same time, a lot of the subnet tokens, when they first got launched, in a way, they're kind of like an early stage, like pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-everything company. And yeah, they carry a lot of risk. So why should we cap how much they can grow
Yes.
in our detail design? So that was another consideration. There were a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to make it so that the economies could grow on their own, and we didn't put a finger on the scale with regards to what the upside was for the tokens, because we believed that could be what people wanted from these markets. And then I think finally, like one of the other concerns that people had from the very beginning was, like, are we bringing into the BitTensor ecosystem like pump and dumps? And we put a lot of effort into ensuring that we built a system that was as safe as it can be in a market for people to participate. And so some of the things that we integrated into the design were, they're all fair launch, just like BitTensor and Bitcoin. You don't get an opportunity to take a large share of a network right out the gate. And that's positive because it's something that we believe was really important to the development of the BitTensor ecosystem, was the fact that people couldn't just arbitrarily dominate the token supply. And we got a very strong distribution of tokens to keep the thing decentralized and moving in the direction that we wanted it to. So we also stayed with the 21 million cap, keep things consistent with the BitTensor ecosystem. Anyways, what I'm listing here is basically the litany of things that we've thought about over the last year, and basically we needed the whole year to develop this out, and now it's on testnet, or like a V1 of what it is on testnet. We're going to basically take some feedback from people over the next month or so about the design as a whole. We want to see how people engage with it, how people interact with the dynamic tau design, and that may push back the launch, assuming there are some issues that we uncover. Hopefully not, and if not, then it really is just a straight shot to launching on mainnet. There were also some major technical innovations. Even though we are scaling many magnitudes in the number of subnets that we will be able to have on BitTensor, we've done it in a way that will actually reduce the size of the chain and improve performance. So you guys are familiar with, hotkey tempos and the dividends being distributed once per day. That's actually been removed. So we pay out dividends automatically, and we were able to do that. by using some technology from the Polkadot ecosystem regarding staking pools that reduced the complexity on the chain by about 40,000 fold, which was a really important innovation that came from Voon here. As far as we see it, I mean, we just launched 276 of them, and as I understand, the chain is still moving, no problem. So that's a good sign when it comes to scalability, and tells us that we'll have no issue on Finny. We are also launching this right now so that members of the community, I'm looking at you, Mog, and Fish from Tau Market Cap, and Rob, I know you're building something as well as everybody in the EVM ecosystem can play around with this and start building the tooling that we'll need once this launches, from front ends, from potentially advisory boards. We want to give this out to people so that they can be ready when this launches, and that we're all in the same foothold. We all have the same view on this technology before it goes out, and no one is left behind. At the same time, because of the way that we built it to be more organic and slow moving, there's no pre-mines. It takes time for the tokens to be emitted. People also have a long time to understand the technology, and before they really engage with it in a massive way. So yeah, why don't we jump into a bit of a demo here on my screen? Cool. All right, so y'all can see this, right?
Yep.
Okay, very cool. So the first thing I want to show is this right here. So this is the price of a single alpha token, because it's subnet 1 in Tau. So this is like what we expect to see very early on, because there's very low liquidity in these pools. And right now we're on testnet, so people are just really messing around. We're seeing somebody that is actually staked a very large amount of Tau into this pool, pushing the price extremely high. And so this is what we really advise people not to do. When you're participating in dynamic Tau on launch, be very careful about the liquidity in these pools. So we can see right here, this is the liquidity in the pool associated with a subnet. There's 350 Tau because somebody's aped in about 400 Tau by the looks of it. And there's 30 alpha. So the relationship between these two terms can give you everything you need to know about the slippage on the chain. And there's no reason that you'd ever want to stake more than 1 Tau in the first day. Of course, over a day or 2 days or 3 days, there's 7,200 Tau that's being emitted, and then 14,000 alpha that's being emitted. So within a week or a month, we will see that there's much more liquidity. And in all the simulations that we've done, we know that there's actually going to be millions of Tau and millions of alpha available in the liquidity pools for these tokens. And that's what we want to create, right? We don't want to create a situation where there's very low liquidity in the long run. So this is why we're creating low liquidity initially, so that it takes time to develop and mature inside of the pools, so that the eventual market is much more liquid and efficient. So anyways, but it's just a fair warning to note that initially, we're definitely going to see this type of explosion in prices. Now, let's look at something else here. So let's look at the market cap. Obviously, this makes sense. It's just the supply of the token times the amount of times the price. People can do this one in their heads. You can see the emission. This is the amount of Tau that is being injected into the pool per block. So we're using Tau inflation to add liquidity alongside buyers. So it's not the only thing that is adding liquidity to these pools, but it will be a very important aspect of the amount of liquidity that is in them. So this is the amount that gets added to these, to this side of the pool every block. And this value here, alpha in, we call it, is the amount of alpha. Oh, sorry. My gosh, excuse me. Let's go back. This is the amount of alpha in. And this is the total supply of alpha, we call alpha out, which is the total supply of the token that exists exterior to the pool. The sum of these two terms is the supply. And that's why you get this value here. And as you can see, they're all going up by 2 per block. This caps itself at 21 million. So it's very easy for people to make estimations about the absolute value of a subnet. There's no explosions in supply. It's not possible for there ever to be more than 21 million. And the rate at which we converge towards 21 million is just twice as fast as tau itself. The last column you guys are familiar with is the tempo, which is when the dividends and mining emission, as well as the owner rewards, are paid out. On that note, we went with a clear 18% on the subnet that goes to the subnet owner. So subnet owners don't need to worry too much about locking funds. We had earlier proposed this idea. There are still some ideas floating around about whether or not we should force a lock on the subnet owners, but we decided against it. We think that just more liquidity, a more liquid market in terms of the owner key is fine. So that 18% of the supply in alpha is being emitted to the owner. Okay, so I'm going to jump back onto the screen and answer some questions while that's running. And actually, why don't we use some people from this stage? Ala or Cameron, can you guys read the questions in the chat and I can answer them when looking at the screen? I'm sure there's some questions. And anybody on the stage can do that job for me.
Yep. I'm here. Actually, I've had one question of my own before I kind of double to the stuff in the chat. If that's cool with everyone. You had mentioned that there is other stuff injecting into the tau pool besides the people buying, right? Can you describe a little bit more about that AMM side of things?
Yeah, so there's per block, a proportion of tau is emitted from the chain. Well, actually, per block, 1 tau is created until the halving occurs.
Mm-hmm.
A proportion of that 1 tau is emitted into the pools based on the supply of tau in the pool already relative to other pools. That's our current design. And you can see this number here in the yellow column in the center, right? So this subnet alpha has slightly more emission per block, and this is the amount here. This amount is increasing by this amount every block. So that's minus what's being sold, right? So that's why this number is actually not equivalent to this, and I'll explain that in a second. So that's one in term in what changes the liquidity of a subnet pool every block. But there are other terms, right? So another term would just be what people have actually staked in to that subnet over the last block, right? So that will, if, for instance, here's an example right here. Somebody has staked into this pool some amount, looks like about a tau worth of testnet tau. There's also an amount of alpha that has been injected into the pool. I'll go into this in a bit, but basically we inject the right amount of alpha to keep the prices consistent. So the chain does not affect the prices. In earlier versions of dynamic tau, we had the prices converging to the emission. We don't have that anymore. So we let them float and the chain becomes much less opinionated about the prices relative to the emission. So that's a consequence of the latest design. And then also there's the amount that is being pending which is pending to go to dividends and miner incentives, etc. Now,
okay, makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, great. And there's also the unstaking events, which would change the supply of the pool. Okay.
Yep. That makes sense.
Well, let's read some more questions.
Yes. Would this create any issues on the supply cap of native tau?
On the supply cap of tau? No, it doesn't change the supply cap. Not at all. Indeed, our hope is that by the time the full emission schedule of tau finishes, there'll be enough of a liquid market on the network to sustain itself beyond the emissions of the underlying token. I think that will actually definitely be the case. And of course, people can still continue to create subnets even when there isn't any tau being emitted. There still will be that possibility. So there will still be inflation potential for people on the chain even after the 140 years or so of inflation that we will go through together.
Understood. Will the halving date be pushed back through people injecting liquidity into subnet pools and thus hindering emission?
As of now, no. So we are backing off of the idea of reducing tau inflation for now. It's something that we may consider, but as of right now, we think that it's probably better for the ecosystem to just have the most amount of incentive that it can. There is automatically contraction in the available tau supply by the very nature that it gets locked inside the pools. So we will actually see a large amount of tau be stuck inside of the liquidity aspects of BitTensor, and so that will add to what is staked as well.
Mm-hmm. What prevents whales from rugging subnets where others have staked? For example, if a big holder pulls out, are the current stakers of that subnet impacted negatively?
I think, honestly, this is the pure risk that people are going to have to take regardless of a subnet, right? And this is something that's true of BitTensor itself. There are whales that have 2, 3, 4% of supply that have acquired it over a very long period of time. But the whole concept of starting with zero supply and slowly moving up is that it should take us to a point where there's a very flat distribution of the subnet tokens. And because of that, there won't be such large whales that can do that type of behavior. Now, if there are, then yes, of course, that risk will always exist in BitTensor or any liquid market. So people should be paying attention to the distributions of ownership across the subnets and also picking ones that they believe in to last long, just like in any selection of a cryptocurrency.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea is
How much? Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, just really quick. The whole idea is put your money where your mouth is. You're investing in the cryptocurrency, so you should do your own research.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's actually not that different from tau in the early days, really. It's pretty much the same.
It will be the same for all of these birthing ecosystems. And it's going to be very exciting to see how people build out their technology and build communities around them in the ecosystem.
How much? Okay, sorry, I might butcher this one. It's kind of a weirdly worded question. How much do miners play a role in the faith of the subnet alpha if they are selling on a daily basis? And in doing that, is it going to have an effect on their own upcoming income?
Exactly, it's a very good question. We thought about this one a lot. All of the subnets on BitTensor have a problem to solve, and that problem is, how can I maintain the price of my subnet token? This is really like any index or cryptocurrency. Because they are proof of work networks, they have to produce enough value to sustain the outflow. This is not something that has been a feature of the subnets up until this point, right? People can create a subnet, it burns a lot of capital. All of that becomes outflow in the ecosystem. And there's nothing that sort of drops that subnet off in terms of importance by the very fact that it has so much outflow. So this is something that we really want. This is something that is like an inherent quality of DTAO, is that a subnet needs to figure out a way of attracting demand, whether that's marketing, whether or not that's producing a commodity of value, whether or not that's attracting investors to make speculative bets on the future productivity of the subnet. Ultimately, they need to solve that problem. It's not something that Tau itself, me, over the last 4 years, needs to solve anymore. As a collection, all of the 64 subnets and then the many more after that need to solve that problem for BitTensor. And if they can't solve that problem for their own subnet, they need to investigate how they're going to be able to do it. And if they can't solve that problem, that doesn't cost BitTensor that outflow. But we're already beginning to see a lot of subnets that are solving that problem. The 2 compute subnets, 3 compute subnets are already producing value. BitAds is talking about revenue with their subnet. And this might be a small proportion relative to the amount of mission they have, but that is the direction that each subnet needs to go. They need to figure out a way of actually creating demand for ownership within inside of the individual network that they produced. If they can't solve it, then yes, obviously the prices will drop. And so, and it's the same thing for BitTensor itself, right? If we can't produce enough value, then the token would go to zero.
Can you speak to this biasing variable known as tau weight and what its purpose is?
Absolutely. Yeah. So at the beginning of the call, I mentioned that what we wanted to do was create a situation where we could slowly move over from the consensus system that we have today, where OTF has 700,000-800,000 tau, and we have reliable validators that are very good at what they do, over to a system where the validators in your ecosystem are holders of the token within inside your ecosystem. That's what we want to create. Because there's no better validators for your subnet than those people that are highly invested in what you've created. But we can't sort of like flip the lid and very quickly, because we have a problem that the initial supply of the subnet token is very illiquid, and there's not much of it. So if somebody wanted to, they could very easily attack a subnet like, say, Inference 19 in order to manipulate the consensus by simply buying a small amount of that initial token. So what we did was construct a relationship between tau that is on the root network. On the testnet, there's 5 million tau, as you can see it right here. This is the top row of this chart. There's 5 million tau on the testnet. And that 5 million tau, which is where everybody's stake will start when this launches on main, everyone will start staked onto the root network. That 5 million tau will be what counts the most within inside of a subnet. So for instance, OTF has 700,000 tau. And in addition has only 500 alpha, because there's only, we've only gotten to about, what are we at? 142 alpha supply, or 512 alpha supply. So let's say that OTF has about 100 of that. The tau on root will still count alongside of the subnet token for reaching consensus. And instead of giving tau a 1-to-1 correspondence in terms of weight when doing consensus, we multiply it by something called tau weight, global weight, root weight, which is how much a tau counts for in terms of alpha. And it's not associated with the price. It's not the price. It's simply just what is the weight of a single token of tau relative to alpha. So if that were, for instance, 18%, then OpenTensor's 900,000 tau would be about 150,000 alpha. In addition to the 500 alpha that it has, that would be how much consensus weight it has. Over time, over about 170 days, the relative weighting of those two things changes, so that alpha becomes the dominant token for reaching consensus in the subnet, and tau becomes much less relevant just by the relative ratio in the amount of supply. So that's what tau weight is. Tau weight is how much a tau counts for in each subnet relative to the currency that is local. Does that make sense? Are there questions about that? We'll definitely be releasing documentation on this, guys. We're just answering initial questions about the design and helping people getting up on testnet. But happy to answer them anyways.
Do validators still need to run the actual validator code?
Yes. I mean, they can child key and they can wait copy, as we know.
Yep. So that doesn't change that much in terms of the process for validation.
No. In fact, we told testnet teams today that they should see almost no change in the way in which their subnet is running with this upgrade. And you can go check it yourself. All of the stake that you had previously is still counting there. And there's only 538 of your subnet token. So relative to the amount of tau that the validators have on your subnet, it's basically irrelevant. And so your consensus shouldn't change. But
Interesting. That's awesome.
asterisk here, do watch this because over a day there's 14,000 alpha, 2 days, 28, et cetera, and that will become to dominate the way in which your consensus works. And so people should be participating on testnet. It's not exactly a valuable asset, but using it to actually purchase the subnet token they have, and also noting that the miners on their network will be accumulating the subnet token.
Which makes sense. I don't see any questions of it. 1 second. Okay, I'm seeing this question a lot as well, Essek. Would subnet tokens be tradable outside of BitTensor?
Not through exterior means. So they have to be traded through BitTensor, this liquidity pool. And so as a consequence, all of the demand for those tokens must be first gated by Tau itself, and therefore Tau acquires or accrues all of the value associated with the tokens in aggregate. People will probably be building, in fact, I know that people are already building DEXs for this type of thing, where you can take Ethereum and you can purchase a subnet token. But the actual flow of how that happens is they take Ethereum, they bridge it to BitTensor, they stake it, they take the Tau that they've bridged, they stake that Tau through the pool to get the subnet token, and then they maybe are able to get some sort of wrapped version of that thing out on exterior chains. But all of the actual demand, again, goes through this pool.
Interesting. Okay, so there's no real way to do it besides going through Tau.
And in fact, one of the reasons that we are doing these pre-mines, sorry, not pre-mines, we're doing these fair launches, and we're slowly incrementing the supply and putting a large portion of it inside of the pools. One of the reasons we're doing this is so that the Schelling point for the market is on Tau. The most liquid market for these subnet tokens will always be here on BitTensor, and creating this the location that most people are trading. Of course, there will be ways of getting around this, like you can sell wrapped versions of things or derivatives, but we can't ever stop that. What we can do is create the base layer on BitTensor and make it so that the demand is gated eventually by these pools.
Do you get any yield for staking in the root subnet? And how is the yield calculated for the root subnet?
It's a really good question. So going back to the description of how we calculate the amount of weight that Tau has on a subnet versus the local currency, the proportion of the dividends that are acquired by the root stakers is the same proportion of the consensus weight that those tokens have. So on day one, there's 5 million Tau outstanding on root, and we'll get 99.999% of the dividends of the subnet tokens. And for a number of reasons, one of them being just purely technical and trying to avoid exponential explosions in the chain. Another one being that we didn't want to just have people have an infinite airdrop of subnet tokens that could be very confusing and difficult to work with. And in reality, most people will just do a rapid unstake across all of them anyways. For those two reasons, we decided to take the dividends of the subnet currencies that are acquired by the root participants and immediately sell them block by block through the pool. And this is actually why we see what we're looking at on the chain right now is that the subnet prices are actually converging lower and lower and lower. And that's because the dividends that are paid out to the root participants are put into the pool. So what this creates is a situation where there's more supply to be purchased in the pool by participants that take the time to DCA, whereas for root participants, they are actually getting the dividends in raw tau, and that will slowly decrease over time unless they choose to allocate. So eventually, if you were a root staker, after a year or more, your dividends will be about a fifth of what they were, unless you choose to participate inside of the subnets themselves. And at that point, your dividends can remain the same relatively, around 15%. But again, they will be inside of the subnet currencies and will be a much more risky dividend relative to tau. So the root dividends don't go to zero, but they decrease substantially to about a fifth of what they were originally. So more math on that to come. And obviously, people can look at how this plays out on testnet over the coming days and weeks to see how root dividends actually play out. Did that make sense, Alan?
Yep, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. If subnet owners receive tau back from the registration fee, while also not allowing subnet owners to whack it back in on day one, how likely is it that subnets would create a combined sell pressure instead of adding liquidity over time?
Actually, I'm not sure. How will the subnets create sell pressure? Was that the question?
Yeah, sort of. So basically, Curb Crawl is kind of asking if subnet owners receive tau back from the registration fee, while also we're not allowing subnet owners to kind of like sell it back in one day, how likely is it that subnets will create a combined sell pressure for all of them instead of adding liquidity over time?
I still don't understand the question, actually. Maybe you can answer it
I'm
again.
not sure.
How do they?
Yeah,
create-
Curb Crawl might ask you to reword that. Not sure I understand either. Let me see if there's anything else I missed.
Are people playing with this design so far? Are people able to download it? Any issues with people getting up to speed on testnet? There's a good question. Will MEV exist in DTAU or just traditional arbitrage? Of course, MEV will exist whenever there is a Uniswap pool. And the only way to mitigate it is to have more liquidity inside the Uniswap pool, or enough liquidity so that the slippage is less, and it is the actual slippage that provides the MEV opportunity. There's a couple things here. There's also the fact that the blocks are randomly ordered, and this makes it slightly difficult. Although we do think that potentially there is a situation where people need to basically they just DOS the chain and attempt to get through one of the transactions, but we haven't actually seen that. We would like people to attempt this on the test network and tell us if they're able to achieve it and what the consequences of it are. But yes, there will be some MEV, and there's basically no way around it if we're using Uniswap pools. Any more questions here? Do people want to get them on stage and ask questions, or would like a demo of other things through the CLI? We can like do a stake list. We can. I mean, I just love looking at the actual the market cap chart. I think it's quite fascinating. I'm very excited to see how this plays out. We've actually removed the stake unstake tempo right now, because there is slippage. That may be enough to just cost people a fee in regards to spamming the chain. So we'll see that play out over the next while, but there is possibility to just bring that back in. Who gets the MEV in BitTensor? Usually it's between searchers, validators, same here. It's a really interesting question. So once we launch Dynamic Tau, for us, the next push from OTF is going to be governance and chain decentralization. If MEV becomes a serious aspect of the chain, we may use it as the actual way to pay for chain validators, because MEV is actually a significant amount of value that could be used to pay for those validators in the first place. So we'll have to follow that through. Lucian says, can you talk about the different alpha supplies of new subnets that reg much later on? Yeah, I mean, so ultimately, if you register a subnet 1,000 blocks after we launch Dynamic Tau, you'll have 2,000 less alpha supply, just as a consequence of the chain moving forward and there being two tau per block being emitted for each alpha token. Pre-detail launch SN reg fees are returned back to SN owner after launch. Exactly, yes. So our goal is to make it so that subnet builders don't have to pay for the initial liquidity at all. On the testnet, we took 100 out of the launch fee just to reduce slippage for this demo. But we think that we will have that at 0. So people will get 100% of their tau back. Keith wants to speak. Oh, hell yeah. Hey, Keith.
Hey, Cons, thanks for having me up. So you mentioned 2 time frames for, I guess, the emissions if you're staking to the root network going down to about a fifth. You mentioned 170 days and then over a year. Could you kind of clarify that? And then a second part of that question would be, is that, reduction in consensus the same across all subnets on that time frame? Like, is it a nice smooth curve down, and is it the same across the whole network?
It's per subnet, because the specific proportion of dividends that are paid out to the root network for a subnet is completely based on the supply of the subnet token. So eventually, once the supply of the subnet token reaches a certain level, the dividends that go to root, the proportion of the dividends that go to root drops lower and lower and lower and lower.
But for the first,
reason why it was,
sorry, go ahead.
Go on. But the reason why I suppose I was unclear about the specific day that it reached 1/5 is because it's very dependent. It's actually a curve, right? It's a decaying curve. Let me see if I can actually get this curve available for people so they can see it, of what the dividends are on a subnet. So let me find it actually. Effectively, there's a reduction in the proportion of the dividends that go to the root network, and that is proportional to the amount of tau. Sorry, of the subnet token that has been emitted. Does that make sense? Here's the
Yeah,
image I
but
found it.
so for the first
So here's-
64 subnets that are launched at the same time, those will all, do that in concert. And then as subnets are registered after that, they will, stick to the same line, but just be delayed based on however long, they registered after the launch.
Precisely. So I've posted an image here in the chat, which shows this proportion changing. So you can see that on launch, 100% of the dividends in a subnet are given to the root participants. But then after, and this is in blocks. This is blocks over 2-year period. And no, actually, this is on testnet currently. This is the current on testnet, and this is with a root weight of 0.18%. And as you can see, in about 30 days, the dividends from root drop off to 50%. So this is like a very steep curve, right? But we can basically modulate this by determining this weight. So if we make the root weight 1, it will take an extremely long time for the dividends in a subnet to ever begin to accrue to the subnet token itself. For testing purposes, we chose 1.8%, and that's what you can see on this chart that I posted into the channel here. And as you can see, it takes about 30 days. So this is a full year, right? So it's about 30 days before it crosses 50%, and then tails off down to about 6%.
And what will be the process for determining what that number eventually lands at upon launch?
It's a very good question, Keith. And when it comes to hyperparameters, there often just isn't a good answer. And this is something that we think can be modified in flight, because it doesn't necessarily hurt people if we change it. Or so we're looking into it, but honestly, we're thinking about 18% rather than 1.8%, which would give us more time. So at 18%, it takes about 178 days before the subnet token begins to dominate the root participants. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In this proportion, it's about 30 days, and it's not clear to us exactly what that should be, right? Is it 170 days? If it's 170 days, then it takes longer for a subnet to reach maturity, so to speak. If it's 30 days, things move faster. It privileges builders. It doesn't privilege people that are on root, obviously. It makes it so you have to move faster. So it's probably something in between those two terms.
Final question. Is this something that could be given to the subnet owner to control, or is this something that'll always be network-wide?
It has to be network wide, because obviously an owner would just choose the value to be 0 and make it so that their token is automatically extremely valuable. Now, the consequence of that, though, and one of the interesting things about this design is that it makes it so that the dividends are not out of this world when it comes to the initial token supply. So you can purchase these tokens, but they don't give you an unreasonable yield. Because if you own the first token, right, the APR on the first token is like 100%, right? And so we didn't have that in the launch of BitTensor, right? We didn't have dividends in the first year. So it took time for us to basically get to that point. Now, that's a good point. We might actually just choose it to be the time that Kusanagi ran. That would be poetic. So and also what this also means, and this is something very interesting, and I think it's very important for people to recognize that because of the sale of the root dividends, prices will drop initially, and there will be a lot of sell pressure on subnets as a consequence of that. Now, does that mean they'll go to 0? It doesn't mean they'll go to 0, because eventually the subnet tokens sell pressure drops itself to 0 via dividends, right? So it is actually a game here for people to DCA into the network slowly and intelligently into the ones they think that are have a long-term success rate, and not let the token prices effectively go down to 0. It's also going to stop the token prices from going absolutely crazy initially, because we know that they probably will. It sort of dampens that, and it will give the community time to allocate slowly into the networks, rather than having this kind of race for the doors to get into those early tokens because they have this crazy dividend. If that makes sense. There's a lot there, but I hope people actually look at this example and see what the economic result, consequences are.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
What's the rationale for cutting the inflation mitigation component? I guess, Nick, the question is, what's the rationale for mitigating less the inflation? If you could write that question again, so I can understand it, that'd be great. Brian says, I think I missed something. If it makes sense to DCA into a token, subnet owners would just sell tau and DCA into their respective tokens, right? Or are they disincentivized to do this? Well, they sell tau. You have to have tau to DCA, Brian. I'm not sure I understand the direction of the question either. There, gosh, I'm really missing a lot of questions today. Noob says, will an update to the BitTensor wallet be pushed at the same time as mainnet launch so the transactions to and from alpha tokens can be processed from there? Exactly. Yep. Very good question. And the answer is yes. We will have a version of the BitTensor wallet on testnet. I think it is already done, but just not yet released. And we'll be able to build on the testnet over the next couple of weeks so that that is, well functioning by the time that's launched, and you won't need to worry about it. But yes, you'll be able to do all those things. You'll be able to stake and unstake and DCA and look at slippage and check prices and do all these things that you would expect to see from that wallet. Will the tempo duration change depending on the market cap of the subnet? Ref, currently, because of the way in which we were able to reduce the chain bloat via our new staking map, we don't see any need to change tempos as of yet. But in the future, as we scale to thousands and tens of thousands of subnets, we suspect we will need to, and we'll monitor that over time. But right now, yeah, so let's stay at 100. And I think that just makes things simpler and the transition easier for people. So there's no condition anymore where only alpha is being emitted, right? Yes, that's true. The new design is actually much simpler in the sense that from a participation perspective, you know that the chain is not affecting the price of your subnet pool. And so at no point is there more tau or less alpha being emitted that would actually crash your price. A question, what will it cost to register a new subnet? Under what circumstances will a subnet be registered? So I made a tweet just before the new year about how we want to drop the subnet registration fees to 0. Still an intention, but we're going to do that slowly. And the way that we do that is we actually just peg the rate that we would like subnets to enter the system. We'll increase that rate slowly over the year and then eventually drop it down to a very fast rate so that the prices to register a subnet will be minuscule relative to what they are. That's our goal. The only reason we couldn't have too many subnets was it was just simply impossible for the root network to participate in the actual evaluation. Already is too difficult to participate in that evaluation. So going above 64 was just impossible. But now we have a functioning market at play that can do it for us. We don't intend to have to do that job, and we can scale to many more subnets. What happens if BitTensor becomes a meme market like Sol, with tau, fart tau? Does BitTensor lose its purpose and value? I would argue that this change is incredibly critical and well-formed, well thought out. And that if anything, we really took our time to ensure that there was a core foundation of subnets across the ecosystem, 64 functioning, many now producing value, non-meme coin subnets that can compete on the basis of producing raw value in the space of artificial intelligence itself, that we have a buffer against pure mimetic style meme coins. At the same time, almost all of those meme coins that you're referring to are pre-mined, low liquidity tokens that have unit bias and attempt to manipulate people based on emotion and such on so forth. We don't have that quality. We have no pre-mines, slow emission schedules, massive liquidity over time in the pools, and we have competitive subnets that are actually doing something in the same arena. Does that mean that there won't be a meme coin subnet on BitTensor? No. I suspect there probably will be 1 or 2 meme coins on BitTensor, and maybe meme coins provide a value in any ecosystem. I can't speak to that. Easy Trades, welcome. Hey, Easy Trades, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we got you.
Hi. Yeah. So I know the team and everyone developing on BitTensor, they've been busy, trying to get detail launched, and just want to hear from your point of view. What do you think would be one good piece of advice over the next coming weeks and months that somebody like myself in the community and everybody else listening can do to help BitTensor be successful?
I honestly think that educate yourself about how to allocate into these pools in an intelligent way so that the market is efficient and doesn't just privilege people that are here first and understand the rules and learn the technology. It would be great to get a conversation going over the next little while and for people to teach each other how it works alongside the documentation that we will be launching, so that we all have a fair foothold. We don't want this to create centralization of ownership in any way. If while you're at it, perhaps investigating the value of the subnets that are out there today and figuring out which ones that you would like to participate in as an honest investor. That's great. That would be very helpful. Using the testnet and helping us break this technology and improve this technology, I'm sure there's gonna be bugs, right? We wanted to get this out as quickly as possible for people. So and as a consequence of that, there's always things that don't work and things that break, et cetera, et cetera. So if you can use the technology and be helpful in the community, in the channels, in the Church of Rao channels, in the Discord here to help us make sure that that's flawless and well understood, that's the best. Easy trades.
Can I add
All right,
something here?
Tom. Oh, yeah.
Oh, please, Tracy. The other thing I was just going to say is just kind of reiterate on Const's point is that in addition to kind of understanding it, it's important to sort of teach it to others as well. I think it's a really, really important point here because as we go, there's going to be a lot more questions than answers at the very beginning. And the more we kind of help each other, the more we'll be able to make educated guesses and be able to kind of make correct, what I'm looking for, make effectively make correct choices when it comes down to investing in which subnet, how much to go into, what the effects could be, and how does it affect you personally?
Yeah. Actually, more questions here. What factors will indicate that DTAO is ready or not ready for mainnet if everything goes well? How soon would mainnet be? Primarily, it's do we have the infrastructure around the testnet that makes it easy to peer into the system and use, right? So have we built the explorers and do those explorers work, right? We've been iterating so quickly that the explorers have not had time to catch up. So we want those to be there. We want the extension to work, right? It needs to work on testnet flawlessly. The technology that you guys are testing out needs to work flawlessly. That's why we have a testnet. We really appreciate it. We also are going to look for just like absolutely absurd market events that occur on the testnet, and if we can use it as another way to peer into the system, and if something happens, we'll definitely probably need to go back to the drawing board there. If everything goes to plan, it could be out in 2 weeks. But obviously we're going to be watching this carefully, and I can't really answer that question, and I hope you guys can allow me not to give that the answer to that question about like exactly when this would come out, because I think it's really time dependent. It's really actually dependent upon what we see on testnet and how the technology grows as fast as we can. I see no reason to go slow. I think that we've really worked on this for over a year, and the community is dying for it, and we should give it to people as soon as possible. Is there a safe way to stake TAO without having insider knowledge? Also, what if people like myself who are uncertain to stake to a subnet affect the stability of the blockchain if less supply was being staked? This is a very good question. So there will be safe ways, and you can always take small bets on subnets and just participate in a small way to wet your feet. And because we have a very slow moving market here, we hope that people can have an opportunity to learn how it works before they jump in. Fully into the pool. The second part of the question was if nobody participates, then the consequence of nobody participating is that those that do go to own these tokens will come to own a large proportion of those subnet pools and manage those subnet pools. But it doesn't mean at any point that we've diluted TAO. So as long as this mechanism is successful, even if you just have one TAO, there's only going to be 21 million, you still have your share of the pie, and that can never be changed, even if there's not that many people that participate in these subnets. You can also participate much later when there's much more liquidity, and I think that there will always be an opportunity for people to get in later down the road. Okay, there were some more questions here. The question: what do we expect for miner rewards with hundreds of subnets? Will there be enough new value created via alpha tokens to maintain current incentives for miners? If the prices sum to greater than the one, the miners are actually getting more bang for their buck. If the subnet prices drop substantially lower, there's less fuel for them to sell into. At the same time, though, if there's no other people selling and there's more buy pressure, we could probably keep it around one, and we expect that's probably the case here. So the miner incentives will be roughly the same. Okay. Good question. Oh my gosh, lots of questions. What is the reason for having a perpetual issuance to root stakers after a year? It's not actually it's actually always decaying. One reason is that it's effectively like a risk-free rate on Tau. Another reason is that it allows the root validators to still participate in maintaining the ecosystem even long after a subnet is created, so that OTF will still always be there as a validator. And I think that but eventually the slow decay will change the ecosystem in a massive way, and we suspect that the root validators will eventually just child key mostly to subnets.
Frank Rizzo has a questions. What was the thought process behind the free subnet registrations? Why not make them put some skin in the game to avoid hundreds and thousands of unwanted registrations?
Basically, we need to pick the rate at which subnets are created, and that will determine the price. There's supply and demand, right? So right now we have one per week, and the price is 2,000, right? If we make that one every other day, it's 150 per year, roughly, and the price should be about a seventh. We want it to be lower so that we can remove the, I would say, like, nefarious consequences of having such a high registration fee, which has forced people to take extremely bad deals in order to attain the lock cost. We want to drop that so much that it is not a really relevant aspect of the system. And it's easier to get, say, like 100 Tau than it is to get 2,000. At the same time, we think that we could bring in ways for people to crowdsource that design. There'll be a lot more development over the next little while, but yeah, it probably will never be zero. It can't be. Like, obviously there needs to be some aspect of Sybil resistance, and I sort of misspoke in my tweet about there being infinite subnets, because there can't obviously be infinite subnets. There has to be some Sybil resistance on the chain, otherwise we just get DOSed, right? But the purpose of having less barriers to entry is that it allows for more innovation, Ref, and Rizzo, and I think that that's something that we should be attempting to push into more in this year rather than last year. Joseph says, post DTAU, does it not make sense to just delete the root network? Owning Tau itself gives you exposure to all subnets effectively ready, so no need for root. Why not get rid of it? One of the major reasons is so that we can smooth in the consensus on these subnets, where they go from initially being run by the top 12 or 16 validators to moving towards mostly run by alpha holders, beta holders, etc. We don't want that to be a sharp event. We want that to be smooth. And the term that we choose for the actual value that we choose for Tau weight will determine how quickly that happens, right? So the root weight becomes irrelevant over time, but still is relevant for new subnets. And it's quite interesting design is that, like, when a new subnet comes into the ecosystem, it will be sort of run by the original crew that we have right now. So it will be the OTFs and the Tau stats and the roundtables that probably run the initial subnet validators, and then over time sort of let them go. So it's sort of similar to what happened with all the 64 original ones, but going into the future. Will all subnets have the same tokenomics? Yes, because 21 million, 2 per block. So the idea of investing into subnet is the reward of receiving a higher mission reward, and the risk is losing your Tau if everyone sells. before you do. Assuming that people do sell and assuming that the token has no value, the idea is that people are value investing into subnets that have value, that produce value. There are a number now on BitTense that already do that, and owning those tokens provides you access to the commodities that are being produced. So, yeah, it's a basic question of market dynamics. Will alpha be only tradable into tau? Yeah, that's right. It will only be tradable into tau, although we cannot stop people from producing wrapped derivatives versions of those tokens. We just are pretty sure that the actual shelling point for the market will be on the chain and therefore through the swapping pools. More questions, more questions, more questions. This is great. Did I miss any from the chat? If you guys want to reply to your own questions, if I missed them. Great question, Tao, for fun. What are the current thoughts on DTAO effect on Senate and DAO? Great. So, the participants in the Senate will still be those that hold the most amount of tau, but the calculation for how much tau they hold will be different. So we will be taking into account the subnet tokens associated with the validator to determine whether or not they're in the Senate. But a better answer to that question, Tau for fun, is that we want it to be less and less important how the Senate runs and the overarching democracy of BitTensor runs. It's my belief that it's much better if we produce 64 to 1,000 independent protocols that have their unique democracies in place on the chain, rather than one overarching democracy that runs the shots. So for that reason, we put this in the original paper that we think this is going to be so important for the way in which we can decentralize not just the tokenomics of BitTensor, but also the governance. Yeah. United subnets of BitTensor. Exactly. The United subnets of BitTensor is exactly what that would be. We're moving into the era of the subnet power rather than the validator power. And I think that's a very good thing for BitTensor. So subnet missions in terms of tau will also be balanced. It's balancing its alpha versus tau for miners, validators, and subnet owners. I'm not sure I understood that question, Neural. Maybe someone can rephrase it. Under what circumstances will subnets be registered? We intend to not have deregistrations, at least until there's so many subnets that if we needed to deregister a subnet, it would be irrelevant. So that's not for a while. DTAO is going to make receiving emissions much more difficult. Most subnets in their early stages will likely not receive emissions for a few months, especially if they're pre-product, pre-revenue, etc. How are these subnet teams supposed to fund their operations if they can't enter any SAFT agreements with investors, since DTAO tokens aren't transferable? Well, I mean, they can still sell their mission slowly to pay for their operational costs, Sammy. So, just like what we did, right? We sold the tokens that we mined slowly over time to investors, and that actually funded the work that we had to do to bootstrap BitTensor. You should be able to do the same thing immediately, even if there's and eventually you just have to get investment from participants in the ecosystem that can do so by staking through your pool. How does it work now that convergence of the alpha towards the emission rate is removed? Inflation of alpha can send it to 0 even with tau staked. So the core design is the following, Lucian. We inject the right amount of alpha into the pool, and they're right so that with that amount of tau that is being injected, we don't change the price. So there's no convergence. It's actually the chain is agnostic to the pool price, and therefore, I'm not sure if that answers your question, Lucian. Actually, maybe stop there.
It's like how Uniswap works. When you LP into a pool, the value that you provide the value of asset you provide on both sides of the pool have to be the same. Otherwise, you can't LP. It's the same idea that we're doing from the Coinbase side. Coinbase as in the protocol, not the company.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Will validators end up running the nodes that handle block creation? Yes, likely a similar set of people will work on that, but it's not necessarily the same people. That will be what we work on after Dynamic Tau, and that's in my my to-do list. I think for BitTensor is to focus on decentralization and governance post Dynamic Tau, and it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. But this is the most important thing. I think that the decentralization of the tokenomics was the most important thing before we got to the centralization of the chain nodes and as well as the governance. Cool, loving these questions. Please write them into the chat if you guys have some holes in your understanding. Or go give it a give the code a run if you're on testnet. Go mess around. The question for Boone, are miners getting 41% of the root alpha emissions or only alpha? Is the root emission just for the 41% invalid emission? Yeah, so the miners are getting 41% of the alpha emission. The root emission is just for the 41% emission of validators. Will DTAP be proposed by triumvirate, voted on by the Senate? Yes, it will be. Not for testnet though. What happens to Tau stock in the pools in 100 years? If a subnet goes shut down, does emission start up again? The tokens in the pool are accessible via the supply of the subnet token. If we ever do deregister subnets, this would be like if they become incredibly relevant and it's basically a garbage collection. Then at that point we will just liquidate those and give them back to the holders. It would be really helpful if there was a dev technical person who would do a short demo recording of installing BT SDK, playing around with simple commands, interacting with detailed stuff. Yeah, that would be great, actually. Yeah, we will have more docs coming in the next couple of days. But for those that are interested in how the installation works, I did actually put the very simple instructions at the very top of this channel. And let me get them for people. So I don't forget, I'll just write them back in. Here we are. So if you'd like to play around with a testnet, you can run these commands in your terminal, and that will get you what you need. Is Tau stats ready for the update, Mog? I think he's left. And I think the answer is no, they're not ready yet. I don't think, oh, he says you'll see. Exciting. Will Ledger be fully functional still with alpha tokens? Ooh, good question for Cameron, actually. Yes, right? Because it's the same keys.
Yeah, you don't have to do anything different. It's Ledger is functional in all transactions. It's agnostic.
Yeah. Functional with Subwallet and with Talisman, right? Not natively?
Well, there's no native functionality with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like on chain, you can process Ledger transactions that get approved.
Right.
Unless you go over the RAM limit. It's like,
How often does that happen?
if you try to set code on the chain, it's not enough RAM on the Ledger.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be doing that. Should be okay.
To Joseph's point, this is actually a very good question. So will subnets be able to modulate the percentage of subnet take, valley take, etc., instead of everyone being fixed at 18, 41, 41? So there's a lot of complexity that is coming out with this update, right? And hence all the questions. Hence why we're launching to testnet early so people can see it. A lot of that complexity comes from the fact that you're not just entering a system new. You're entering that system with a bunch of presuppositions about how it works, and then on top of it, your Tau, and you're wondering if whether or not your Tau is safe, et cetera, et cetera. So people, including myself, want less complexity. And so when it comes to the modifying of the percentage of take that a validator can take relative to the subnet owner, we felt like it would be better for the market to reduce the complexity, because we're dealing with a basket of effectively similar items. And those similar items made similar by the fact that they can't change those parameters will be easier to rank and also price by participants in the ecosystem. Now, in the future, we do think that it would be possible to modulate that, but modify that, pardon me, but not right now, JJ. Yeah, true. All right. Well, next week we'll be back here on stage and we'll have a TGIT. It's going to be with Nickel 5. It's going to be about the Zestimate team and Next Place. So it's going to be really exciting. At the end of that call, we'll also have time to answer more questions about Dynamic Tau. In the meantime, we wanted to get this out to you guys as soon as possible so that you could play around with it. I hope you do. Read the docs that we put in the announcement. Very simple to install. It should all just be working there like a charm. Yeah, go nuts, guys. Yeah, thanks everyone for coming to the call. Lots of love. Have fun. Thanks for being here on this really important day for us, and another one coming very soon. So, ciao, y'all.